with this Tory government. They haven't listened. They haven't taken the chance to change course, and they haven't seen the need to compromise. This government has typically and arrogantly ploughed on. Throughout the passage of this bill, they have voted down and ignored anyone and everyone who has sought to defend devolution and uphold international law. The character of this government is crystal clear. They are consistent in their contempt. Madam Deputy Speaker, as always, we accept and respect our decisions with regard to selection of motions and amendments. But if members refer to the order paper of today, they will see that the government had options available to it that would have perhaps demonstrated it did have some remaining respect for the devolution settlement and the national legislators of these islands. It could have held over third reading until each of the devolved institutions had considered legislative consent motions. That would have been respectful to the devolved institutions. It could have referred this bill for further scrutiny to the Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland select committees. But instead, it insists on using its majority to force this bill through without even pretending it cares what the devolved nations think. So I will give way.
I think we're giving, well, I mean, they're getting very agitated about some of this, but isn't that the point? That the real power grab here, the real undermining of the devolution settlement, is the callous disregard for the Sewell Convention, which this government put on a statutory footing and is now completely ignoring. That is one of the fundamental acts that is undermining devolution across these islands.
My honourable friend is quite correct. And, you know, we were told after the referendum in Scotland in 2014 that Scotland's place would be respected, that we were to lead the United Kingdom. And here, Madam Deputy Speaker, we find not just our Parliament in Edinburgh, but the administration in Cardiff and in Northern Ireland are being ignored. We can refuse to give consent, as we are doing to this bill, but the government carries on regardless. Where is that respect for devolution? Where is the respect for the people of Scotland that voted in a referendum in 1997 where 75% of the people of Scotland voted for a parliament? It's not the SNP's parliament, it's not the Scottish Government's parliament. It's the Parliament of the people of Scotland. The Parliament of the people of Scotland, where a Scotland Act was passed that gave powers over devolved matters. And what the government benches refuse to see, what the rest of us can see, that this Parliament is giving itself the power to override the Scottish Parliament in health, in education, in transport and housing. And, you know, well, I can hear the Minister shouting. It's his bill. It's his bill, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I suggest he reads it. Because clause 46 and 47 are very clear. Powers over infrastructure, including water, electricity, gas, telecommunications, sewage and other services, railway facilities, including rolling stock, roads or other transport facilities, health, education, cultural or sports facilities. The Minister can sit and tell us that it doesn't override devolution while the facts are in the bill. What the government has done has overridden devolution, and quite frankly, I can tell you, Madam Deputy Speaker, we in Scotland will be having absolutely none of it. So tonight, just as, and you know, you can chunter and shout all that you like, because at the end of the day, the people in Scotland have been watching what's been going on over the course of the last few months, Scotland being disregarded, the fact that we won the election in Scotland last December on the right of Scotland to choose its own future, that we had no desire to be taken out of the European Union against our will. You can choose in England to do what you want as far as Brexit is concerned, but we do not...
Order.
Making it clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the people in England can choose what they like in this regard. But we do not consent to Scotland being taken out of the European Union. And we have a mandate from the people of Scotland that we have the right. We have the right to determine our future. And we've got the callous disregard of this government that has so far refused to grant a Section 30 licence that we can have the choice in our own future. And not only are they frustrating the will of the Scottish people to have that referendum in our future, but we now find that they are seeking to take powers back from our Parliament. Now, I can hear a Conservative member saying that you had your referendum. But the point is, Madam Deputy Speaker, when we had our referendum in 2014, we were promised that we would be left as members of the European Union, that we'd be respected within this union, that we were going to get a powerhouse parliament, the strongest parliament in the world. Madam Deputy Speaker, the opposite has happened. And when the facts change, people in Scotland have the right to change their mind. And what the government doesn't seem to recognise is that there is a gathering momentum in Scotland in support for the SNP and support for independence. And they can chortle because the reality is that many people in 2014 that did not support Scottish independence have rightly changed their minds. And they have the choice of a future of Scotland being a member of the European Union, a law-abiding independent country that accepts our responsibilities in the global world, of creating a fairer society, of coming out of the COVID crisis, of building up our economy. And it's that choice of that clear vision that we offer against what has been done to Scotland by this Conservative government. And I can tell this government that what they are doing with this bill is absolutely determining that the people of Scotland will make that choice. And yes, we will become an independent country, because we want no future with what the Conservatives, the disrespect that we see day in, day out from the Conservative government to our Parliament in Edinburgh.
And I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend, and the more they chortle, the more support for Scottish independence will rise, and they know that. But I heard the Minister saying that this is Scotland's Parliament too. And she will know, as my right honourable friend will know, today an opinion poll came out. Does the Minister want to know what's in that opinion poll? 4 times as many Scots now support the Scottish Parliament over this Parliament. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that their aggressive unionism of undermining our Parliament has failed, and all it's doing is rising support for independence?
Yeah. I have to say that my honourable friend is correct, and I'm sure, as I do when he gets back to his constituency and he speaks to people, that we are, I almost have to say, that we're being encouraged by people to get on with it. They've seen enough. They've seen what's happening to Scotland from this Conservative government, and as I said earlier, we're having none of it. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, tonight, just as during second reading, there lies a fundamental choice for every member across this House. This is now the last opportunity and the last chance to salvage some dignity and respect for democracy in this place. Leaving it to the other place would be a complete dereliction of duty. This is the democratically elected House, and it is our job to oppose this undemocratic piece of law.
But notwithstanding that, of course I agree with him about this bill. It's a nonsense. It's a rogue's charter, as I said in a previous debate. But would he also encourage members of the House of Lords, who have historically played a role in defending the rule of law, to make sure that they do their best to improve this legislation, if that's possible?
I understand why the right honourable gentleman makes that call. We should not be relying on the members of the House of Lords. They are unelected. But the fact is, this place hasn't done its job to defend the rule of law, hasn't done its job to protect devolution. And I feel for members on the Labour benches that were responsible under Blair's government for bringing devolution in, because everything that was done, everything that was established under that programme is being undermined. And there is a real call to everyone in Scotland, regardless of whether they voted for the SNP in the past, to recognise the maxim that power devolved is power retained. And you know, people in the past have said to me, could Westminster shut down the Scottish Parliament? And I've argued in the past that would be fanciful. Nobody could possibly believe that our Parliament could be attacked in such a way. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, what is happening with this bill is that our Parliament, that's had the support of the people of Scotland, is being usurped. And it's not getting more powers, because actually, read the bill. Read clauses 46 and 47, and read clause 48, which takes away from Scotland the powers that we have overstated. You know, when I look at the government benches, it really is Trump-esque. It is twisting the truth beyond reality.
Will he give way?
I will happily give way.
Would you agree with me that one of the most harmful aspects of this bill is set out in the explanatory notes, where it says that this bill will be a protected enactment under the Scotland Act, the Government of Wales Act, and an entrenched enactment under the Northern Ireland Act 1998, which means it cannot be modified by the devolved legislatures and will not be open to those legislatures to disapply any of the provisions of the bills or to modify their effect. We are stuck with this, and this government can continue to make things worse if they choose to do so. It's taking it out of the Scottish Parliament's hands.
My honourable friend is quite correct, and it's perhaps worth reminding the House in this context that we have the joint ministerial committees. And the joint ministerial committees recognise the responsibility they have to put frameworks in place. And the governments in Scotland, I can hear the honourable lady saying that they have done, and she's quite right about that, because the government in Edinburgh, in Cardiff and in Belfast recognised the need to work together where it was appropriate in creating the circumstances to make sure there was continuation of a market across these islands. And the commitment that I make, and the commitment that my party and my government makes, is that we will work constructively with the government in London to make sure that that happens. But the rug has been pulled from under that by a UK government that has sought to bring this bill forward, that legislates for the market it wants to create and attacks the fact that we have provisions in Scotland in areas such as environment and food standards and building standards that we can no longer defend, because there will be a race to the bottom and accepting the lowest standards, and there is not a single thing that we can do about it. Not a single thing that we can do to protect our food standards once this takes place. Now, you know, the Minister's shaking his head, but we already have differences, for example, in pasteurised milk. But what will happen post this? We will not have that ability to see the uniqueness of our regulations. What happens in terms of support to our crofters and farmers, for example? Madam Deputy Speaker, the responsibility falls tonight on this House to do the right thing. And I can obviously understand if those, particularly in the government benches, are unwilling to take advice from me and my party. But they would do well to listen to the strength of the argument emanating from some on their own benches. During the committee stage of this bill, the former Prime Minister and member for Maidenhead gave a powerful and insightful analysis of the dangers of this legislation. The member's words are worth repeating for those left on the Conservative benches who are not yet card-carrying members of the Cummings and Prime Minister's ideological cabal. She concluded her remarks by warning, and I quote, "I consider that in introducing clauses 41 to 45, the Government are acting recklessly and irresponsibly with no thought to the long-term impact of the United Kingdom's standing in the world. It will lead to untold damage to the United Kingdom's reputation and puts its future at risk." Stark words from the former Prime Minister at what this government is doing to trash the reputation of the United Kingdom. Now, myself and the Right Honourable Member from Maidenhead may not agree on much, but few could deny that these words were not only powerful, they are very likely to be proven prophetic. Madam Deputy Speaker, despite the... Well, you know, I hear a comment too long. Too long, it's not fair on everyone else. I'll tell the Labour front bench what's not fair. What's not fair is what's been done to Scotland tonight. And I have the right, as the leader of the Scottish National Party at Westminster, to make sure our voices are heard, and I will tell this House that tonight the voices of the Scottish National Party will be heard, and will be heard without apology. Madam Deputy Speaker, despite the bluff and bluster that we have repeatedly heard, none of us are fooled that this is some kind of benign business bill. We know the real intent of this legislation. After 21 years of devolution, the Tories are stripping powers from our Scottish Parliament. The Tories did not support devolution, and now they see the popularity of the Scottish Government and they don't like it. And little wonder why, because that support for the Scottish Government stands in direct contrast to the unpopularity of Tory governments from Westminster. Madam Deputy Speaker, earlier today, the Scottish Social Attitude Survey shows that public trust in the Scottish Government to act in Scotland's best interest at more than 4 times the trust that's shown in the UK Government. The survey conducted in 2019-20 before lockdown shows people were nearly 5 times more likely to say the Scottish Government should have most influence on how the country is run than the UK Government should. 61% of people trusted the Scottish Government to work in Scotland's best interest, compared to a record low of 15%. 15%, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the UK Government. And you can bet your boots after what's happened tonight, it will be a lot lower than the 15% that was recorded.
Madam Deputy Speaker, point of order.
Order, sir.
In order for a member of the member for Lochaber and Ross and Skye to be able to filibuster so much in order to abandon other people being able to input in this debate which is going on at the moment. It's surely not fair on so many people that want to contribute.
That is a reasonable question for the honourable gentleman to ask, but if the honourable gentleman for Ross, Skye and Lochaber were to filibuster, it would not be in order, and I wouldn't allow him to do it. The right honourable gentleman is not filibustering. He is making a very powerful argument, but I do note the honourable gentleman's point that the honourable gentleman has spoken for more than twice as long as the other front benches, and that he will appreciate that there are a great many other people who would like to make a contribution to this important debate tonight. However, it is not a matter for me. If the honourable gentleman has the floor and he can speak for as long as he wishes, but I know that he is both honourable and a gentleman, and that he will bear in mind that while he has the floor, other people do not have the opportunity to speak. Mr. Blackford.
Indeed, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I think we had a demonstration there from the Conservative benches that members from Scotland should sit down and shut up, that we shouldn't be heard in this House. But I can say to the honourable gentleman, there's a very easy fix. There's a very easy fix to that. Let's have the Section 30 order, let's have the referendum in Scottish independence, and we can say goodbye to you. Thank you and good night. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster does not care for the polling numbers that I referenced, and he does not care for devolution. He, after all, is the architect of this bill. Parliamentary etiquette, my goodness. Devolution's been butchered, and I hear Conservative members talking about etiquette. What a load of keech. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster has set out his agenda. Scotland is to be dealt with. The Scottish Parliament is to have its wings clipped. Westminster is to take back control and wants to give itself spending powers over our devolved matters.
I'm just interested in my right honourable friend's view on the subject of keech, and this idea that if honourable gentlemen and right honourable gentlemen and ladies on the other side want us to go, there's a very elegant and convenient solution that we could have this. And wouldn't you agree that that solution is right in front of them? Scottish independence, which is on the rise, and we'll be quite happily out of this place.
My honourable friend is right, and I think the government benches know that a referendum's coming. We should really just get on with it.
Hear, hear.
This bill, after all, is giving Westminster direct spending control in Scotland in devolved areas, in health, in education, in housing, in transport. And the people of Scotland know from long and bitter experience the Tories can't be trusted to spend money in Scotland. The Tories will look after their own interests. They will never support Scotland's interests, as tonight just demonstrates. The passing of this bill gives the Tories free rein to bypass Scotland's Parliament and bypass the democratic priorities of the Scottish people. Madam Deputy Speaker, that democratic principle, the right to choose our own form of governance, comes to the very heart of what is at stake if the Tories force this legislation through tonight. They can try denying it all they like, but it's the Tories themselves who are breaking the constitutional settlements that have democratically supported across these islands. This legislation rips apart Scotland's claim of rights. It's enshrined the sovereign right of the Scottish people to determine the form of government best suited to their needs. That claim of right was debated on an SNP motion in the last Parliament and was passed without objection. It is a long-held principle that sovereignty in Scotland rests with the people of Scotland and not with Westminster. That historic right has its roots in the Declaration of Arbroath and formed the basis of the determination in the case of McCormick versus the Crown by Lord Cooper when, as Lord President of the Court of Session, he gave his opinion that said that the principle of unlimited sovereignty of Parliament is a distinctly English principle that has no counterpart in Scottish constitutional law. That principle of the sovereignty of the people of Scotland is under attack with this bill.
Would the honourable gentleman give way?
I'll happily give way.
Would the honourable gentleman agree with me that there are plenty of reasons to oppose this legislation that don't necessarily involve the case for Scottish independence?
Well, the fact is that what is happening as a consequence of the attack on Scotland's Parliament and the powers of our Parliament, that people in Scotland are making that determination that they wish our country to be independent and they wish our country to become independent as soon as possible. This bill undermines the settled will of the people of Scotland who voted in a referendum on the basis of our Parliament having control over spending in devolved matters. It is that fundamental, it is that serious that is happening right now. This is a defining moment. The UK Government are attempting to block the sovereign right of the Scottish people to decide Scotland's future. Madam Deputy Speaker.
It's great to hear him remind the House that the principle of the sovereignty of Parliament is a purely English doctrine. Does he agree with me that in seeking to interfere with the inherent supervisory jurisdiction of the Court of Session, this bill also potentially breaches Article 19 of the Treaty of Union between Scotland and England?
It may well be right that that is the case. My learned friend has much experience of these matters, but I would simply say that this House, if it passes this bill tonight, really just does not seem to care about the issue of law and treaties.
Will the member give way? And I thank the member for giving way. I feel like a Pez dispenser of clarification on the Good Friday Agreement. But in the course of discussing sovereignty, would the members opposite agree, and would the member agree that in fact it's not an ornament in the shelf, but the Good Friday Agreement, being endorsed by the people of Ireland North and South, is in fact sovereign as regards Northern Ireland? And would the member further agree with me that not only does this bill protect the Good Friday Agreement, it offends each of its strands and it offends its principles of democratic process, respect for differences and the rule of law?
Absolutely. I fundamentally agree with my honourable friend, and we all look on with alarm at what could happen if the Good Friday Agreement is disrespected, and we give every good wish to our friends in the island of Ireland that the maintenance of peace is maintained, but there is no question that this government is playing with fire. Madam Deputy Speaker, time is short, so I must now move on. It is pretty ironic that at the very same moment that the Tories are robbing the Scottish people of their sovereign rights, those behind this power grab are using the very same arguments on sovereignty to impose their extreme Brexit agenda. In February, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster lectured us, and I quote, "The experience of history tells us that the countries with the maximum amount of control over their own destinies are the best equipped to succeed economically and indeed to secure a greater degree of equity for all their citizens." If the Minister holds this to be true, then it ought to be true for Scotland. And yet, through this very bill, the UK Government are trying to rob those rights and those powers from Scotland's democratically elected Parliament. The best that can be said for this UK Government is that they at least wear their hypocrisy on their sleeves. When it comes to sovereignty, I've been looking back at what the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster has said over the years. He said on the 14th of October 2012, when talking about the EU, Give us back our sovereignty, or we will walk out. If he thinks this matter is so crucial, why is he leading his government to attack the Scottish Parliament? Why is he disregarding our sovereignty in Scotland? Madam Deputy Speaker, we will push our amendment tonight to defend democracy, to defend Scotland's interests, to defend this barefaced attack on our Parliament's powers. We know that the vast majority of Scotland's MPs and the Scottish public will be with us. What of the 6 Scottish Tories, though? Will they stand up for Scotland? Will they stand up for our Parliament? Tonight is their chance to join with us, to reject this power grab, to reject Westminster trampling over the devolution settlement, to respect that the Scottish Parliament should determine spending on devolved matters. A failure to join with us will show that the so-called Scottish Tories have reverted to type, reverted to what they have traditionally been, hostile to devolution. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me conclude by putting this in context. Over the last number of years, Scotland's people have watched on as Westminster ignored our views on Brexit, launched power grab after power grab and undermined our democratic rights. This legislation is the last straw. It leaves us with only one option and only one choice. A growing and consistent majority of our people have now come to the same conclusion. They know that the only way to defend Scotland's parliaments and powers is through independence. Madam Deputy Speaker, the words of Charles Stewart Parnell, who used to sit just 2 rows back here, still ring true. Tonight I direct these words to the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, and I will do this 2 lines in Gaelic and then give an English translation. Hanil Corieg dunya chruchen a chuet un ustis duha. Hanil Corieg dun a histe a chuchi huich. Yev shiv kufada risho agus hanai and bachu. Madam Deputy Speaker, no man has the right to fix the boundary to the march of a nation. No man has the right to say to his country, thus far thou shalt go and no further.